Welcome into the EMA Online Pregame Podcast. I'm Mason Voth, joined by Alec Bussey as we continue to get ready for the next game up in the Wildcat season. And it happens to be another top 10 team, Oklahoma State, in Manhattan this weekend. The Wildcats trying to take down Oklahoma State for the first time since 2018. That was Bill Snyder's final season. And then 2019, things were a little bit odd and wobbly in Stillwater. 2020, Will Howard plays, and it was a close game. K-State led 12-0 at halftime. Final score ends up being 20-18, but a very odd fumble by Will Howard ended up in the hands of Jason Taylor II, who took it back for a touchdown. The Wildcats scored a touchdown late in the game to make it 20-18, and Will Howard's two-point conversion ended up in the hands of Oklahoma State as well. So that is how that one went last year. Same type of deal. Skyler is down. Will Howard gets hurt in the first half, so Jaron Lewis has to play the rest of the game, and it didn't have very many highlights there. So things have not gone well for the Wildcats over the last few seasons against the Cowboys, but they will try and turn that all around on similar circumstances this weekend, as they will be shorthanded again. And that's probably the best spot to start with all this, Alec, is where the injury situations stand at this point in time. Any of the guys that were, I would say, limited in the game against TCU that entered that game, and we knew that they were going to be, held back a little bit, like Deuce Vaughn, Felix Anyudike, Uzama, they're going to play. No worries there. It sounds like Deuce, based off talking to him, what Colin Klein said today, things are in a better spot than what they've been in the last few weeks. So that is good news. And I think that they managed Felix fairly well last week once they finally realized the kind of rhythm that they wanted to use for him. So those guys will be out there, but there are certainly bigger fish to fry, and the number one ends up being Adrian Martinez. So we'll have to see how things go from there.
Yeah, and I apologize if you can hear a train horn going off in the back here.
I can't hear the train, yeah.
You can? Okay, yeah. Chugga, choo, choo. Yesterday it was blaring. Like, I've never heard a train horn go more than like 3 times, and this thing probably went 7 or 8 times. I swear there had to be a car on the tracks or something. Thankfully, there was no news breaking that I saw that anywhere. Back to the injuries, though. Yeah, I think the injuries are the biggest storyline, and not just for Kansas State, but probably for both teams, Mason, when you really look at it. Obviously, K-State's dealing with a lot of things. I do think they expect to have a few guys back. Julius Brents, Joe Klanderman said on Thursday he expects to have back. Josh Hayes he expects to have back. Daniel Green, they're still kind of seeing where he's at. That's a day-to-day, maybe a game-time decision kind of thing. They wanted to see him practice on Thursday before really getting a good understanding of what his availability would be before Saturday afternoon's game. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they're being really mysterious with the quarterback situation. And personally, like, that's not surprising to me because it's quarterback and you can kind of change the way another team has to prepare. It's like, why would you give the opposing team information on the quarterback if you don't have to? Because obviously their skill sets are a little bit different. I think you can consider Adrian a little bit more of a gifted runner than Will Howard, where Howard's a little bit more of a gifted pocket passer. Now, I think at the other positions on the offense, Deuce Vaughn has seemed to progress a little bit better this week, according to what Colin Klein said on Thursday. Ben Sinnott, he said he seems probable, but also a little bit of a day-to-day situation, but he used the word probable describing Ben Sinnott. So I think that that's probably a good thing that you can probably expect to see him on the field on Saturday. And then thankfully for K-State, they didn't lose any more offensive linemen because they've obviously had a few issues there. But for Oklahoma State, I think that that's also a little bit up in the air. I think it's safe to expect Spencer Sanders to play quarterback for the Cowboys. I feel like there was a lot more Twitter rumors, things kind of floating around last week before their game against Texas, and he trots out and he has a really good game against the Longhorns. He threw for 391 yards. He ran for 43 yards. So he obviously had a really good day. He actually threw it more times than any quarterback in Oklahoma State history, I believe, which is kind of nuts to consider doing that with a bum shoulder. They've had some issues at running back too with Dominic Richardson. He left with a head injury. That's what our Oklahoma State website told you guys. And then, on the defensive side, they've got some issues too with their safety. Jason Taylor's obviously a really good player. Leads the Big 12 in interceptions. Jim Thorpe Award semifinalist. He hyperextends his knee on that interception of Quinn Ewers at the end of last week's game. So there's certainly some injuries for each side that need to be monitored, and we're going to have a lot of notes taken, I think, before the game about who's warming up and who's not warming up, because it's certainly going to be something to take note of.
Yeah, well, and kind of crazy to get these two teams at this point in time where they're both banged up. Sanders, he threw for a lot last weekend, but he wasn't the most accurate. And now you throw the ball 57 times, like you have some wiggle room there. But he ends up going 34, 57, 391 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. Played well for the most part. He carried it 11 times for 43 yards with a long of 16. So the legs, I mean, it's not what it's been at times, but he was still able to be mobile in the game. And that's going to be something that I think is going to be a challenge for K-State, especially if Daniel Green isn't there, because then at that point, you were possibly playing less athletic players at linebacker. You're playing inexperienced guys that are now having to try and make that decision on, can he still throw the ball? Do I need to stay where I'm at in coverage, or do I need to come up and try and stop the run? I think that's going to be a very interesting wrinkle to how things end up playing out. Other injuries, I mean, it's good to hear that Julius Brents and Josh Hayes are going to go. That's a big win for K-State and everything that they've got going on. The Julius Brents play was weird. He ends up going and holding the back of his right leg on that big touchdown pass to Quentin Johnston last week. That was a play that he got injured on. And then Chris Kleiman said he did come back. He probably shouldn't have. So he had to deal with some stuff, but he'll be good to go. Ben Sinnott is one that's important because out of those guys that play that position, tight end or whatever you want to refer to him as, he is probably the best blocker that they have. So if you need a guy that can get a block for you, it's like Sammy Wheeler caught the touchdown pass, but he's been a little bit tough in blocking situations this year. So we'll have to monitor that. And then the important ones of Adrian Martinez, seeing where that thing goes. I tend to side with you. I think based off the way that it's been talked about and handled this week, I doubt that we see him play. But they'll make their final determination probably as we're recording this right now and getting ready for this weekend's game with their Thursday practice. But it just seems like the way they've talked, Will Howard's probably going to be in there. And I don't know, maybe you feel the same way, but it seemed like there was a time or two when Chris Kleiman was talking on Tuesday that he had to kind of backtrack a little bit. And it wasn't like just slap you in the face obvious, but maybe some subtle comments that would lead you to believe they already know that Will Howard's going to start the game. But he wanted to go back and be like, but, again, like if Adrian can't go, then Will's going to be ready. And maybe you heard that, maybe you didn't.
Yeah, no, I definitely heard that. And that's something that it's really important to be able to read between the lines, I guess you could say, or maybe listen between the lines is a better phrase to use if that's something that people say. It's definitely one of those tough situations. He did say on Thursday, and I was the one who asked him what his policy or what his program's policy is on putting players on the field on Saturday for a game without having practiced on Saturday, because I think that that's kind of an interesting thing that each program kind of has their own policy. And he essentially said that, if you're an older player and you've been through the program and you've seen so much college football, we'll put you out there because you've seen so many different pictures. You're going to be able to read and react the way that's necessary through film and whatnot. But younger players, he obviously wants them to be able to go through practice and get not just those mental visual reps, but get the physical reps of actually going through a play and seeing scout team offense, seeing scout team defense. And I found it really interesting with Adrian Martinez that when he was speaking on him and what he would have to do to be able to play, that they made it sound like they would like him to be able to practice at full speed by Thursday. And we're recording this on Thursday. So if he was able to practice at some point today and was able to go full speed, maybe we see him on Saturday. And if he wasn't, I highly doubt that we're going to be able to see him on Saturday, because I don't think that they want to end up in a similar situation as they did last week, where you put him out there for the first drive, his knee kind of flares up, acts up because of a run, or he gets hit oddly, gets tackled weird, what have you, and he has to leave the game. And maybe it's one of those situations because it's a home game and you can dress as many people as you want for a home game because you don't have to have a travel roster, that he still ends up dressing and he's available as an emergency type of quarterback, so they don't have to go to an Adrian Lara, or maybe they try to avoid using Jake Rubley in that situation. I doubt it. I think they would still probably rather go to Rubley than an injured Adrian Martinez. But I wouldn't be shocked if Adrian Martinez isn't available on Saturday and they just decide to go with Will Howard and play it safe, because it would really, really stink to lose him for the rest of the season if you're Kansas State. And I understand the importance of this game in the Big 12 championship picture with already being down a game to TCU after the loss last week. Oklahoma State figures to be, in a lot of people's opinions, and I'm sure the people that are inside that program kind of looking at things as well, another really highly touted team in that race for the second spot in the Big 12 title game in Arlington, along with Kansas State. And you can throw a few other teams in there. I think Texas still probably is in that mix if things kind of bounce their way. But yeah, you kind of look at it, and this is a really important game for both Kansas State and Oklahoma State because you don't want to fall back to third place by yourself with, especially for Kansas State with two big games coming up against Texas and Baylor.
Well, and the tough one in that regard ends up being that then if you're K-State, your two losses are to Oklahoma State and TCU, the teams that are in front of you. So they would have that tiebreaker. And so even if you end up with two losses, you would need Oklahoma State to find two more losses along the way or TCU to find three. I do think Oklahoma State loses in Norman this year. I think that Oklahoma is going to, their season's not gone as planned. They're going to want to be trying to move this thing back in the right direction. They'll be pissed off about last year. That strikes me as a game that Oklahoma comes away with a win in. And then at that point, you have to figure out, based off of what's left for Oklahoma State, where some of the other results end up going. So that's going to be a road trip to Kansas. And their situation's still up in the air because you don't know when Jalen Daniels is going to be back, if he's going to be back at any point. So that might make things slightly difficult. So yeah, we'll have to see where things go on that front. But that's why this is so important. And on the topic of Martinez, I think it's a situation, if he's healthy and he's going to be out there at all, he's going to start the game. And if he can't start the game, then they're not going to put him in at any other point. And honestly, if Adrian isn't in the position where he's good enough to go and his legs aren't going to be able to make plays like the plays that we've seen him make over the first 7 games of the season, because he busted off a decent run to even start the game against TCU. If he's not in a position to do that, then there's really no reason in putting him out there, because even though he's taking chances now, the arm strength still isn't like otherworldly. I think Will Howard has just as strong of an arm, if not stronger, than Adrian Martinez. And part of Adrian's benefit of him being in the pocket still is kind of avoiding some tackles and being able to keep plays alive back there to get a throw off, and how limited would he be in that regard. So I think we'll just have to see how Will Howard plays and how things go. You were, I think kind of surprised at the words you had heard on Will Howard coming in to your time covering K-State, because everybody seemed to be so negative about it because it didn't go very well the first 2 years that he was here. That was a different Will Howard that we saw in Fort Worth on Saturday night. So what is your takeaway from Will Howard, and what is your thought if he is the guy that ends up playing this weekend?
Yeah, he obviously played really well when he was down there against TCU in the first half in particular. In the second half, I think Kansas State only ran like 23 or 25 total plays. So it's obviously one of those situations.
And he wasn't in for, however
one
many
or
of
two
them
of
because
them.
he was out hurt. So
Yeah, I don't think he was in for 1 or 2 of them, maybe a full series after he was
I think
tackled.
Rubley got 2. I think Rubley got 2 full series out there.
Did
One
he?
that
Okay.
and then an interception, and then another one where he got stopped on the 4th down when he tried to run the sneak play.
Just so you know, by the way, you're cutting out kind of badly.
Yeah, you're cutting out too, so we can play the blame game and try to figure out who it is.
Okay. I don't know who's. I didn't want to have to make you go in and edit this, but it was kind of bad. Yeah. Okay. So Rubley did play 2 series, like you said, and I think that definitely puts a situation on Will Howard where we didn't get a good grasp of what he was doing in the second half, because I don't think he was able to get into a rhythm. But you kind of look at what he did on those first 3-4 possessions against TCU, and that was obviously really inspiring. Leads 3 touchdowns on his first 3 drives. He's responsible for all 3 touchdowns. And then on his 4th drive, or his 5th drive, it would have been his 5th drive, Deuce breaks that 50-yard touchdown run, and they get another touchdown. So on his first 5 drives, Kansas State scored 4 touchdowns. That's a pretty good hit ratio, if you ask me. Now, I will say he just played free, in my opinion. That touchdown pass he threw to Cade Warner was a gutsy throw. I thought the pass that he threw to Malik Knowles down on the 1 yard line on that post pattern over the middle was a great throw over the linebacker, over the middle of the field, dropped in to where the safety wasn't able to make a play on the ball either. That was a good play. And I do think that there's got to be reasons for trepidation going into Oklahoma State, where I know Oklahoma State doesn't have the best defense in the Big 12 like they did a year ago when Jim Knowles was in charge of that group. Now it's a Derek Mason-led defense. But when you look at having an entire week to prepare for a quarterback, I do think there is something that needs to be said for TCU probably didn't prepare too much for Will Howard because no one really kind of knew publicly that Adrian Martinez was dealing with some knee issues until literally after the first series. So I can't imagine that TCU prepared too much for Will Howard. And then now you're probably getting in a situation where Oklahoma State's probably preparing a little bit for both because they don't know who they're going to see. And just preparing for Will Howard just a little bit is going to make it easier for Oklahoma State, I think, to prepare to defend him in a more effective manner than TCU did last week. And we know that even though Oklahoma State's defense has taken a step back from last season where it was at with guys like Rodrigo, sorry, that's his Hard Knocks name, Malcolm Rodriguez. But it is a group that there's reason to believe that there's still talent there and they still have some playmakers, especially if Jason Taylor II is able to go.
Yeah, and we'll see kind of how it ends up playing out and what ends up going on. I thought Will Howard played well. So here's a recap of what it looked like when Will Howard got into the game for K-State. Now they end up having to deal with a punt, whatever. But with Will Howard in the game, K-State goes touchdown, 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 touchdown. They had a 3-and-out that they punted at midfield, which was when you felt like they could have gone and given, a version of a kill shot. They don't. TCU gets the touchdown before half, then the half ends. They come out, and Will Howard takes them down the field to the TCU 26, and Chris Tennant misses a field goal that would have given K-State a 7-point lead at that point. And TCU takes the ball back. They score a touchdown in 4 plays. That gets tough. Well, then we find out the reason they didn't go for it. Will Howard was banged up a little bit. He was holding the back of his right knee. So Jake Rubley has to come in, and he throws an interception on his second play of the game. TCU turns it over on down, so K-State gets the ball back down by 3, and then they turn it over on downs because Jake Rubley can't pick up the first down on the quarterback sneak. TCU gets the touchdown to go up by 10, and then when Will Howard returns to the game, he gets him in scoring position again. Tennant misses a 40-yard kick with the wind, and at that point, K-State's still down 10, and when they got it back, it was just kind of desperation time. Will Howard threw a pick. I'm not blaming him for that. You're just trying to make something happen late in the game, and unfortunately, that's what led to a 38-28 finish. So Will Howard played well, and I think year 3, things have probably improved a little bit with him. The one thing that I would warn in trying to declare like this was some life-altering moment in college football for Will Howard is if you go and think about what happened when TCU played Kansas this year. Now, that first half, there was hardly any scoring that took place of any kind. It was a low-scoring first half. TCU ended up having somewhat of a lead at the break, but Jalen Daniels plays the entire first half, doesn't do anything out there for Kansas. It's 10-3 at halftime, and Jason Bean has to play the entire second half. What Bean does is go 16 of 24, 262 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Without a doubt, the best game that Jason Bean has ever played in his career. In the game since TCU, Jason Bean has continued to miss throws of some kind and struggle a little bit. He's not been as bad as what some would lead you to believe, but he has some turnover-worthy throws in there. My concern would be that what was seen out of Jason Bean is something similar to Will Howard, where TCU's got a pretty blah secondary and maybe prop him up. I would hope that's not the case. I hope that's just a guy that took advantage of it. And I would also hope that it's not something that is they felt like, all right, we got nothing to lose. Will's in the game now. Because coming into this game against Oklahoma State, If you know he's playing the entire time, then maybe you feel a little bit more of a weight on it as opposed to crap, Adrian's out, whatever happens, happens now. So I think they're going to have to remain aggressive, but we're also going to have to, and we'll probably find out pretty early if Will Howard is a changed man at quarterback or if he is still kind of the same guy that we've seen over the last 2 years that some silly turnovers follow and you just kind of scratch your head at things that go on. But we will know right away. I think in the game this weekend, if it is Will Howard out there, what the situation is and what the move going forward will be. But that's one thing to keep in mind is that Jason Bean lit the world on fire against TCU secondary in the second half, and he's not been viewed as positive since then. Although you go and look at the numbers, they're not horrible. It just doesn't feel quite the same. So we'll see how it goes. One benefit, you have Deuce Vaughn back there, and if Will Howard can even just give you a slightly average performance, that's enough to keep Oklahoma State honest to where they have to worry about the passing game, and Deuce can maybe break something. DJ Giddens was nice to see the game that he had against TCU. He might be able to provide something. So you're not asking the world of Will Howard, but you are asking a little bit of him just to take some of the pressure off of the run game so it can still do some things, because that was the problem in Stillwater last year. They knew with Skylar out, K-State was limited. The only thing that they were going to be able to beat Oklahoma State with was the running game. They shut Deuce down. I'd have to go look at what the numbers were. And really the only big play that K-State had in that game was this weird little pass that Jaron Lewis had where he looks like he's tackled and all of a sudden the ball just squirts out into Deuce's hands and he took it like 40 yards or something. But that's really the only offense that K-State was able to have in that game last year in Stillwater. 31-20 was the final score of that game. Malik Knowles took a kickback. But K-State only ran for 62 yards, 28 of which were Will Howard's, 22 which belonged to Deuce Vaughn. So that's something to take into consideration going into this weekend's game, is that K-State just needs a little bit out of the passing game. And if they can get that, then I actually feel pretty strongly about their chances. And Oklahoma State, as we've already covered, they are beat up in the secondary. And it's also not something they excel at when healthy. They've given up over 300 yards a game this season through the air. So all things to consider and take into mind, and very long-winded. So I'll give the floor to the senator from Illinois.
I guess for me, if Will Howard is the one that's out there, you need to do things that are going to allow him to get completions easily and just move the ball in smaller chunks. And I know I said that a little bit earlier in the season with Adrian Martinez in terms of just kind of building confidence in the passing game. But I really do think that that's important, especially when you have a quarterback that you're maybe not ultra familiar with. And I know he's played a little bit in the last couple of years. So if you're a Malik Knowles, you're a Phillip Brooks, you're a Cade Warner, you have caught balls from him a good amount. And I imagine that he's taking a good amount of snaps this week in practice. But still, you want to hit on some slants, you want to hit on some screens, some outs, those routes that get you 3-4 yards, and then allow you to kind of open up things downfield in the passing game. Because if you're able to hit on some of those, I think it would do Will Howard a lot of good. Because if he comes out and struggles from the get-go, then it's going to be hard, I think, for him to really kind of find some momentum to hit on those intermediate passes, those long passes. So I think it would be really beneficial for K-State and Colin Klein to put him in a position to be successful early in the game and on those first couple of drives to not only hand the ball off to Deuce and hopefully get, your 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-yard carries, but then also to hit on some 4-yard completions, some 5-yard completions. And then hopefully later in the game, you're able to hit on some that are 10 yards, 12 yards, maybe you hit on one that's 26 yards, whatever it is. And I think a lot of those things kind of open up when you're able to hit on those short passes. But like you said a little bit as well, it all kind of goes back to being able to hit on the run game. And you'll see tomorrow, if you're reading the game preview, that one of the biggest, that the player in the spotlight that, in my opinion, for K-State's offense is Deuce Vaughn, because even if Adrian Martinez plays, you know that Kansas State probably isn't going to run him as much as they have in the past couple of weeks where they found success with him in that area because the knee isn't 100% healthy, right? So now it's one of those situations where you're going to need Deuce to kind of have probably his best game of the year, regardless of Adrian Martinez availability, but especially if Adrian Martinez isn't able to play and you have Will Howard starting and taking majority of the snaps at quarterback for K-State.
It's a good call because, Deuce Vaughn is your best player, and so you're going to have to lean on him at times. this is the perfect opportunity to lean on him. And he played well against TCU, even knowing that he was banged up a little bit. He was able to come through, and that big run was great. 47 yards for a touchdown, and he ends up only getting 12 carries in the game. Now, some of that was just kind of dictated by how the game was going at that point. You mentioned K-State runs very few plays in the second half. They were also having success throwing the ball early. And I think that there are a couple of things. I think you have to give Will Howard throws where he can be aggressive, but not like in a stupid way, like don't try what you try with Cade Warner a ton in this game against Oklahoma State, because Chris Kleiman said it himself. They thought it was going to get picked. Cade Warner just made a heck of a play. But if you give him something where you look at it and say, hey, if you catch it, and once you receive the snap and you look, just let it fly, and Malik Knowles will be there for it or something, or give him some throws where they're not necessarily dangerous, but he can take a couple of shots to get some chunk plays, because that was something they did well against TCU. I think it ended up totaling 8 plays of 15-plus yards through the air, which ends up being the most that they've had in a game this season. The next closest game was the one against Oklahoma. So they were able to make things happen there, and I think you give him that opportunity, and then we'll see how exotic Colin Klein gets with calling the plays, and if they have anything kind of unique that they can do. I don't remember the exact number of times that they did it, but I do think there were some times DJ Giddens and Deuce Vaughn were on the field together against TCU. That's something I assume that we will see more of going forward, just to have some options there, and maybe they do something a little bit crazy and creative as well. But I think that this is a game that's going to get a lot of, more than usual, emphasis and focus from everybody with everything that's going on. And we'll just see how it ends up playing out for him. But I think it's weird that, and we've talked about it all week, K-State's been the Vegas favorite in this, even though all of the information would seem to stack up against them not being a favorite. But I think that highlights just how banged up Oklahoma State is, where Dominic Richardson appears to be in the concussion protocol. I have a tough time believing that after a concussion, like, he's going to be back this week. Some guys do it. I just don't assume that he will be there for him. If Spencer Sanders' legs aren't at 100%, that's certainly of benefit to K-State, and he's missing a ton of receivers, given they've got better receiver depth than what K-State has, so that is a benefit as well. But I just think that there's some oddities with everything that's gone on this week. It would feel like kind of redemption and comeback arc for Will Howard, who, if you think about it, probably 2 weeks ago, we were about, like, is he the odd man out? Is he the dude that transfers at the end of the season and isn't going to be a part of this, quarterback battle over the next 2 years with Jake Rubley, Adrian Laura, and Avery Johnson? And now all of a sudden, like, he's still the number 2, it would appear. He has shown some life. And Chris Kleiman said today, like, that's just not the kind of, or on Tuesday, that's just not the kind of guy he is. So we'll see where things end up rolling on. But I just, some fishy things going on here that lead me to just say, I'm gonna let it fly with K-State and see what happens this weekend. But I told you before we started, K-State either wins this game or Oklahoma State blows them out. And I think we'll have an idea of that early on. But that's just where I think things are kind of pointing to. Either it means K-State's going to win or Oklahoma State wins this thing like by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, going back to the betting line, I know you're a little bit surprised at K-State's favorite, and maybe I am too, because I do think Oklahoma State's the better team, and maybe Vegas just disagrees with me. And, Vegas tends to know all. I will say K-State's obviously the home team, and that generally gets you about 3 points. So I think that probably has something to do with Kansas State.
Yeah, but if this game was in Stillwater, like, I would think Oklahoma State's more than a 1.5 point favorite. Like, yeah, I would still think that they should
Oklahoma State would then be getting 3.5 points automatically. So K-State's automatically getting 3.5.
I mean, maybe. I think it's like, 3.5 is what they say it's worth. But then, like, I would still, based off how this thing works right now, like, I Oklahoma State, it would feel like, and maybe it's just because, like, we're more aware of the K-State situation, and Oklahoma State people are probably looking at it and saying, like, oh man, I can't believe we're only a 1.5 point underdog. Maybe it's that type of deal. But I don't know. I think that if this was in Stillwater, I would think that it would be more than what you could juice it up to at this point. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like if it was in Stillwater, Oklahoma State's probably like a 4.5, 5.5 point favorite.
And I'd be like, oh man, that seems pretty easy based off everything that K-State has going on. Pound Oklahoma State. So I don't know. We'll see.
I mean,
We'll see where it
do you think
goes.
that's what it would be if it was at Stillwater?
Well, that's what it would appear to be, but that doesn't make a ton of sense to me, given everything that's going on.
Yeah,
But
I just think that, I mean, go look at the rest of the lines in the Big 12 this weekend, or go look at previous lines in the Big 12, or go look at future lines that different services are providing, and every single line is the exact same. Basically, they're all within a point or two in the Big 12. They're all
yeah,
1.5 to 4.5 point spreads.
yeah,
Because
they're all
every team
tight
is
this
essentially the
weekend.
same aside from TCU.
Yeah, OU is a 1-point road favorite at Iowa State, and Texas Tech is a 2.5-point home favorite against Baylor. So we'll see. TCU is the outlier. They're 7.5 on the road at West Virginia. One other thing that will have direct impact on this game defensively is the fact that Khalid Duke is going to have to miss the first half of the game due to his targeting penalty that he got in the second half against the Horned Frogs. That is certainly a big hit to K-State and everything that's going on because, I mean, when guys are down and beating around, it would be nice to have him in there and maybe be able to do a couple of different things, help him pair up with Felix Anudike-Uzama, give some different looks rushing the quarterback and also just having another linebacker that's healthy. But they're going to have to find a way to manage through the first half without him. How frustrating would that be if you were on the K-State sideline knowing that Khalid Duke is missing the first half of this game for something that for the most part is avoidable because we have seen Khalid Duke make plays like this in the past where you just kind of scratch your head and go, come on. He did it against Texas Tech in 2020 where he got a unnecessary roughness penalty where you just kind of shake your head and wonder what's going on. So where would you stand on if you had to be the one in the ear of Khalid Duke?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely frustrating, but at the same time, like targeting penalties happen. It's one of those things that I feel like it's going to take a while for them to get away from football. And I will say I'm not a huge fan of the whole, if it occurs in the second half, that you should not be allowed to play until the second half of the next game. But at the same time, I get it. There needs to be some sort of extra punishment more than just a 15-yard penalty. Maybe you could change it to where it's like a 20, 25-yard penalty if it happens in the third or fourth quarter. I don't know. That seems like that seems to really flip the field in favor of the team who gets hit. But I don't know. I just think it's one of those situations where K-State has to manage it differently. And if you're Kansas State, like obviously you can't play in the first half, so you need some of your other edge rushers, whether that's Felix, whether that's Nate Matlack, whether that's Austin Moore at linebacker, any of your other linebackers, Jalen Green, if he's determined to be able to play, to obviously have success in the pass rush. But in the second half, when you have Khalid Duke and he's going to be completely fresh, like that kid needs to be a menace in the backfield for K-State's defense, because I think one of the biggest keys to the game for Kansas State is going to be to keep Spencer Sanders in the pocket and not allow him to run around and scramble and pick up yards that way, because if he's able to run, that's really going to open up their passing game through the read option and RPOs. And that's something that Oklahoma State likes to do. And they don't have a great stable of tailbacks that they can use. So if you're able to keep Sanders in the pocket, I think that would really help Kansas State's defense find success, because it's going to force them to throw the ball downfield. And I do trust K-State's secondary against it. What you hinted at earlier is obviously a pretty banged up and pretty hurt Oklahoma State group of wide receivers. So keeping him in the pocket, I think, is a huge key. And in the second half, when you get Khalid Duke, like that's when it becomes really important, because he's going to be fresh, he's going to be healthy, he's going to be ready to go, and that's huge.
I think the question is going to be, because I think you're right on that, if Spencer Sanders is actually able to run right now.
He's going to run. He's going to run because he ran last week when he was more banged up than he is this week.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know.
And
so last week,
he's someone who you can say and you can cater the playbook a certain way so he doesn't get hit and so he doesn't get banged up. That's just a kid who just plays. Just loves to play football.
I mean, he's still going to be able to go and do things, and he's still going to try and make plays with his legs, but if he's limited in any way, I mean, last week, that was the least amount of yards he's ran for in a game this season, 43. Outside of the outlier being Arkansas Pine Bluff, he only tried to run 2 times. They just decided to pick Pine Bluff apart through the air. That was the game where O State was minus 55.5, and yours truly took that.
Was that a big spread?
Yeah, it was a big one there. But I think that's something where you try and find something. You're right. They don't have a ton of running back help right now. Nixon is probably going to be the lead back for him in this upcoming game. So we'll see how it ends up going down. But I think if you just make him move a little bit more, he's not going to be able to run like he could at full strength. Like you think about what he did to help him beat Baylor, where he ran for 75 yards. Tech, it seemed like he was always finding ways to make plays. I think you're going to see him at that level, but make him uncomfortable, because if he's not going to have the same, typical group of receivers that he's used to, that's going to benefit you. And he's one of these guys that in the Big 12 gets complacent at times and will make that head scratching play. Now, not to the level of what we saw like Brock Purdy in past years, or up until this year, Max Duggan. Like Max Duggan, I don't know how Sonny Dykes was able to go in there and coach the stupid out of him. Like Max Duggan is the Big 12 player of the year.
State did to get the stupid out of their starting quarterback?
Because
I would completely argue that the stupid in their quarterback was significantly more than the Max Duggan stupid.
Adrian Martinez trying to make a play.
46 combined turnovers.
I think the stupid that was in Adrian Martinez wasn't actually in him. I think it was on the same sideline as him, and the stupid was named Scott Frost.
Wasn't the one in the game. Like, the situation wasn't great, sure, but he was still the one who had the ball knocked out of his hand and was the one throwing it into coverage.
But Scott Frost put together the lineups. He put together the rosters. He called, helped call the plays, like all this stuff.
Put together the most talented roster in that side of the division in the Big Ten, though.
Well, that doesn't mean much.
I get what you're saying. The situation was not advantageous to Adrian Martinez being successful, but I also think it's the same thing with what Max Duggan was experiencing at TCU. It's not like Gary Patterson was putting those TCU teams in the greatest position to be successful. They haven't made a bowl game.
True, but I don't. But I mean, Gary Patterson does have the track record of having some decent quarterbacks down there. I don't know.
Scott Frost has a national championship, Mason.
Well, yeah, I guess that's a great point. Gary Patterson would have one if college football wasn't this tiered system where the big dogs are the only ones that get to eat. I think that, if you would have seen some of the plays that Max Duggan made, those were like off script dumb. Martinez, the ones that like the turnover plays he would make, like I just think a lot of them came. Well, yeah, you say boneheaded. You need to go watch some of the turnovers that Max Duggan and Brock Purdy had.
I'm sure that Brock Purdy's were bad.
Max Duggan, I'm trying to think who it was against last year. But it's like he's falling backwards and he like throws the ball backwards. It mess. Adrian Martinez's turnovers, I think, were a lot of them came late game. He's forced to make a play because his offensive line sucks and he doesn't have a ton of great direction anywhere on the team. And so they're at least like they're turnovers, and you say, "Oh my gosh, how can you be so stupid at a time like this?" But they were not stupid turnovers. Whereas you watch what happened with Duggan and Purdy, like those are stupid turnovers. But Sonny Dykes has been able to help him get past it. And honestly, maybe part of it is at this point, like Gary Patterson was past it all, and he was not there for Duggan. So maybe I need to give more credit to Max Duggan, and maybe he had an idiot on his sideline. I don't know. I'm not gonna call Gary Patterson an idiot, though.
No, I don't think Gary Patterson should be called.
He at least has a pretty long track record.
Gary Patterson's tenure at TCU shouldn't be looked at as being this like great time to be a Horned Frog. They haven't made a bowl game since 2019. Is that correct?
No, but look, you can't really count 2020, weird year, and they did make the Texas Bowl that year, but it got canceled. So take that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna get on him for any of that.
I don't know. I just find it ironic how you're talking up Max Duggan and like the starting quarterback at the school we cover is.
I'm giving him credit, and I think it's been proven, given the fact that Adrian Martinez has not thrown an interception this season, and that Scott Frost has been fired. You put those two things together, I think it tells you that Scott Frost was the problem. Adrian Martinez is fine as long as he has an okay offensive line, a head coach that's competent, and a lot of other things that most teams have in college football. He did not have that at Nebraska.
I will say that this needs to be added to the conversation, and we can move on to something else.
Yeah, we need to talk about kickers after this.
Huh?
We need to talk about kickers after this.
Okay, cool. My favorite thing to talk about on every podcast, if you haven't learned by now. And this isn't to bag on Adrian Martinez, and I hope it doesn't come off that way. K-State's passing numbers this year are not impressive.
I'm
And I know
sending
some
it
of
to
that
him
falls
tonight.
on pass pro. I know some of it falls on the receivers and scheme and whatnot, but their passing numbers are not very good. They're in the bottom of the Big 12 in almost every passing category, and that's obviously not expiring. I don't think he has 1,000 passing yards yet this season. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure he's not at the 1,000 mark. And we're
I mean,
entering week 9.
you're right about that. That is true. He's at 907 passing yards right now, but they
Put the
also
game away, but still.
like they haven't necessarily needed it. And in the games where they did need it, like yes, the first 3 games it was bad, but we've been over it. Like the Tulane game was their beyond scared straight game. Like they needed that. I think if the Tulane game does not play out the way it did, they don't win in Norman, and they probably don't win some of these other games. I think he's been good at throwing the football the last however many games when they've needed him to. And
He
they're
made
still
throws.
going to be very heavily run based. So I like, yes, statistically speaking, they are at the bottom of the Big 12 in passing, but it's not like it's some disaster. And it's costing them games at this point. So we'll see what it looks like when he gets back out there. But I think he's fine. His QBR is 75.3. That's 25th in the country right now. So that's at
pretty
least a solid number. All right, let's get into the third phase of the game. There is one thing that's been on everybody's mind over the last however many weeks of the season, and it simmered down for a little bit where people were not as wild about Chris Tennant, like in a negative way, because he was making his kicks. They were winning. It didn't matter. And then he misses 2 kicks at TCU, one of which Chris Kleiman said, hey, kind of spot, but he would have told you he could have made it. It was into a tough wind, but it came nowhere close. And then I took heat for that the second kick of the night didn't have a chance to go in. Given the direction that they were going, like the wind was helping them in that spot. It was 40 yards and it hits the outside of the right upright. I think I am justified in saying that one did not have a chance to go in. If it hits the outside of the upright, it doesn't have a chance because you were missing it wide right. That I don't know. That's a little personal bugaboo of mine. And for the first time this year, Chris Kleiman was not over the board supportive about Chris Tennant as the kicker. He made it clear that we may see Ty Zentner or Leighton Simmering come in there and kick in this week's game. We'll see what it looks like. They were going to have competitions with that at practice this week. Although the way Chris Kleiman phrased it was they were going to be competitive in practice this week, but it wasn't going to be a competition. Yet we may see somebody other than Chris Tennant kick field goals this week. So we'll see what that means.
Yeah, he was saying that on Tuesday, and I was like, you've contradicted yourself 4 times here about who's going to kick.
Yeah, I would. I would just put it this way. I think we're going to see, and Chris Tennant may be out there at some point, but I think that we see somebody come out and attempt the first field goal of the game, not named Chris Tennant. It's just going to depend, I think, probably what practice looked like this week, where you go into it and you try to make the determination, okay, who do we trust more? Like that's probably going to be the most important part of this is did Ty Zentner look good in practice? Do you feel like you can go out there with him, or do they try giving a shot to Leighton Simmering, who's a freshman from Minnesota? We'll see. I've pointed this out in the past. If you go and look at Ty Zentner, who talked this week to us, he did all 3 at Butler Community College, where he kicked off, he punted, and he kicked field goals. His field goal numbers are not all that inspiring. He was 10 of 19 when it came to actually kicking field goals. So it's not like he lit the world on fire there. Certainly things can change. But what do you think of the kicking situation, and how many kickers do you think we see attempt either a PAT or a field goal this week?
I know I've written this, and I don't want to sound repetitive, but I just think that you want a kicker that's going to be pretty close to automatic inside 35 yards. Whether that's Zentner, whether that's Tennant, whether that's somebody else, just find someone who's going to make their kicks inside 35 yards and be happy. Especially at this point where you're now entering week 9 and you're still kind of flirting with the idea of who's your kicker going to be. I don't know. If we're in long range, we're going to use this guy. If we're in short range, we're going to use this other guy. And I just don't think you want to be flirting with all those different things. So Find a guy who is going to be consistent inside 35 yards, going to make his kicks, and put you in a situation where you're going to be able to get points on the board when you need to. So find someone who is going to be able to do that for you.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not going to act like I know.
That's
I'm
the
not going to
ideal
sit up
thing.
here and I'm not going to sit up here and give a whole bunch of analysis on kicking because I don't really, one, don't know a ton about it, but two, I'm not going to overcomplicate how simple it can be. I don't think K-State fans are going to be upset if they're missing half their kicks from more than 40 yards.
Yeah. Here is the breakdown right now. Chris Tennant is 114th in the country in field goal percentage. He is outside the top 150 in extra point percentage at 92%. And his long of 37 this season is tied for 135th in the country for longest field goals this year. So he has certainly struggled. And as talked about, he's 5 for 5 inside 29 yards, but those are chip shots basically. He is 4 of 6 when it's between 30 and 39, and he has not hit a field goal beyond 40 yards this season. He is 0 for 3 in those scenarios. So that just a little different the way things have gone. And with the way that the game's being played right now for K-State, they're going to be in more close games. You're going to need somebody that you can trust to go out there and knock down a 40-yard field goal for you. And right now, K-State certainly doesn't have that. And even that 30 to 39 range is a little bit dicey. So we will we'll try to see what the situation looks like. I think it'll be fascinating to watch those three guys warm up during the week and what the direction ends up being at the kicker spot. But that's something that's going to be different. I'm also of the belief that we see Chris Kleiman be a little bit more aggressive than what he normally is. If because of the uncertainty with kicker, say that they have a 4th and 3 at the what would be a weird range, like I don't know, the Oklahoma State 33 or something. I could see him going for it this week and trying to make some of those plays, depending on the situation, but maybe upping the aggressiveness a little bit, just because if you're not confident in your kicker, you might as well give it to Bruce Vaughn or somebody that can possibly make a play for you, because that seems like you've got a better likelihood of doing that than making one of those kicks right now.
Yeah, take a page out of the Baylor book, take a page out of the Texas Tech book, and they have a lot of success going for it. Analytics say to go for it on 4th and 3 inside the 50-yard line. And quite frankly, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to punt it if you're at the 40.
Yeah.
And I know that's something that is becoming more and more common thought in college football and really the NFL too, is go for it if you're in a situation where it's 4th and manageable. If it's 4th and 3, 4th and 2, 4th and 1, and you're around the 40-yard line, you're out of your kicker's range, or it's not great conditions to kick a field goal, more and more coaches are deciding to go for it. And I think we saw Chris Kleiman's willing to do that. Just look at what happened in the game against Tulane. He was willing to go for it in those games. And I think we could see a similar situation on Saturday against Oklahoma State if Kansas State finds himself in that situation, or he decides he wants to play the field position game and punts it from the 40.
Could do that.
Everyone's favorite thing to see.
4th down conversions this year, K-State is 54% on those, 7 of 13. The concerning thing, and I don't want to put fear into people right now, K-State is converting less than 32% of their 3rd downs this season.
That's not good. Especially when you're playing against an Oklahoma State defense that only allows their opponents to convert on 25 of them. And if you read the preview for Saturday's game, you'll notice that I single statistic out as something to monitor. And I'm done giving cliffhanger, and I'm done telling everyone what is going on in my preview. I want you to read it.
Well, yeah, get it out there. K-State is 112th in FBS this year in 3rd down percentage.
Where's Iowa ranked?
Iowa's 122nd. They are 27%. The only other Power 5 team that is worse than those two would be Rutgers at 26%. Here are some other Power 5 teams that are worse than K-State. Texas A&M, they are under 31%.
Not a surprise.
Virginia Tech is at
Not a
30%.
surprise.
Boston College under 30%.
Don't know anything about them. Not a surprise. It's Boston College football.
Colorado under 30%.
Not a surprise at all.
Virginia under 29%.
Awful offense. 5 new offensive linemen this year.
Georgia Tech 28% exactly. And then
Not a
Iowa
shock.
and Rutgers, as was mentioned. The worst team on third downs this season, the New Mexico Lobos, 15.38% on their conversions on third down.
15%?
Yeah, 15%.
Golly. That's terrible.
And so just to kind of make note of this, K-State was 44% on third downs last year on third down conversions. If they were 44% this season, they would be 32nd in the country. So you think about how different things could be. I mean, obviously the Tulane game is one of those. There were a couple of moments in the game against TCU. If they were a little bit better on third down, things change. So the little things there, and that's one concerning thing moving forward. And that might be something to tuck away and ask Chris Kleiman about next Tuesday, is why he thinks that there's such a difference this year versus last year. So I don't know. We'll focus on that at a later point. But those are some of the things to take into consideration this week. At least the fourth down numbers aren't as bad as the third down numbers, and we'll see if they get aggressive with it and everything else. Any other thoughts on K-State, Oklahoma State this weekend? Since you're going with the Cowboys, I'm going with the Wildcats. Before we very briefly hit on the other 3 games in the conference.
Yeah, I'm taking Oklahoma State to win. I actually decided to change my score as we did this. But yeah, I'm taking Oklahoma State to win just because I don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be for Kansas State. And I trust Oklahoma State's defense just a little bit more. Not Oklahoma State's defense, excuse me. I trust Oklahoma State's depth just a little bit more than K-State's. I got the Cowboys winning 27-24, but I would not be shocked if Kansas State wins, even if Will Howard is playing quarterback. And if Adrian Martinez is at quarterback, I think I might side with the Cats.
Okay. I will, just so you don't get your head chopped off or anything, I will give you the option to, if Adrian Martinez starts, I will allow your pick to be K-State. And if Will Howard starts, I will allow your pick to be Oklahoma State. I will let you flip-flop there.
Deal.
I will, depending on what Gabe does, I will give Gabe the same opportunity.
Deal.
Just, you guys are.
Do we get to do that in our Big 12 picks too?
Yes, I will give you that same opportunity there.
Okay. I had a good week last week.
In turn, since I'm just taking K-State no matter what, my pick is worth double there. How about that?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I tried to help you guys out.
What do you mean? You're going to get 2 points? No.
I get credit for 2 wins on that one.
The smart thing to do if the smart thing to do would be to pick Oklahoma State and then just flip it if Adrian Martinez is playing.
Well, I'm just trying to throw things your guys' way, because I would have probably won in either situation. Other Big 12 games this weekend.
Record of the 3 of us.
Yeah, my lead has shrunk though. You're only 4 back now, and Gabe is just 1 back. So big weekend.
Here comes Gabe.
11 a.m. to 11 a.m. games. TCU at West Virginia on ESPN. Here's what's going to be weird about this. West Virginia is kind of a different team at home, as we know. They beat Baylor, and then they go on the road and get just smashed by Texas Tech. How many games do you think TCU loses in the regular season? Because they're not good enough to go unbeaten, but they have gotten.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I don't think they can go unbeaten, but they have gotten.
Sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. There's
have
no
you seen
way.
The rest of their schedule?
I understand, but I think there are still some weird ones out there for them.
If they get past the Texas game, which is on November 12th.
Yeah.
They will have at Baylor and against Iowa State, because I do think that they win this weekend against West Virginia, and I do think that they probably win against Texas Tech next week in Fort Worth. I do think that TCU could be undefeated.
We'll see. It doesn't seem likely to.
Now you're thinking about it, don't you? Now you're thinking about it.
No, yes, it is a possibility, but it is not likely to me, is the way that I would phrase it. Do you see West Virginia keeping this game close at all?
I think TCU wins by a touchdown or more, but I don't necessarily like it. Like, I wouldn't put money on this game because it's in Morgantown, and winning in Morgantown is really tough to do. We saw Baylor struggle with that. We know West Virginia can put up a lot of points, and that's obviously something that TCU's defense is susceptible to, is giving up points. So if it turns into a shootout, I'll side with TCU being able to score more points, but I do think it could be close.
The other 11 a.m. game, Oklahoma at Iowa State. I'm taking Oklahoma in this one. They're only, I think we had it at 1.5. Now it's down to 1 point as a favorite. Iowa State's not going to have the offense to keep up with them. Their defense might slow them down a little bit enough. Like I don't see Iowa State winning this game. And honestly, like Iowa State, that this is going to be kind of a scary year for them because they still have West Virginia left on the schedule. That's a home game. That's a benefit. But they'll finish off with at Oklahoma State, home against Texas Tech, and at TCU. So they still have some of their tougher games left in front of them. And I don't know how many games they're going to win. They and West Virginia will probably be playing for last place next weekend. That's what that game will determine.
Yeah, so I think this Oklahoma-Iowa State game is really interesting because I feel like it's a really good offense in the case of Oklahoma going against the Big 12's best defense. And I feel like it's a really bad Iowa State offense going against arguably the Big 12's worst defense. So it just kind of it's.
Yeah, I just think I think Oklahoma finds a way to blow through it.
Yeah, I think the talent probably comes through for Oklahoma, but I wouldn't be shocked if Iowa State wins this game. I mean, the line's only 1 in favor of Oklahoma. It's at Jack Trice. I don't really feel like Iowa State's not good, but I don't really feel like Iowa State's objectively bad. Like, I feel like they've had a lot of these games kind of not go their way.
I would agree with that.
Play here or play there. I mean, the Texas game is a great example of it. I mean, Xavier Hutchinson has that ball. Should have been a touchdown if he doesn't jump. Like, if he doesn't jump, they win that game.
Iowa State is not bad, but they are not good enough to win games.
No. You know what they give me vibes of?
A rich man's Iowa.
No, they give me vibes of 2021 Nebraska.
Ooh, wow. They might take offense there, but that's not bad.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah. Is the tough part about it too that
really weird ways this season because of a play here or a play there? They lost. I mean, they lost to Baylor by a touchdown. They lost to Kansas by 3 points. They lost to K-State by 1 point. They lost to Texas by a field goal. They've lost 4 straight games, and all of them are by a score or less. I'm getting some Nebraska vibes.
That's fair. Last game, 6:30, Baylor at Texas Tech. It may not mean anything, but it'll be a lot of fun. We'll see how things play out for those two teams. Tech is a 2.5 point favorite at home. It's blackout weekend in Lubbock, so they'll be pumped for that.
They're gonna be
people
drunk,
have been thrown around. What?
They're gonna be drunk, you said?
Well, they might be, but they're going to be all wearing black, so they at least have that going for them.
Need to be more specific. Talking about blackouts.
Well, at least they'll have all the tortillas to kind of soak things up down there. This is what I've been looking into. The last time that Baylor pulled off a victory in Lubbock was 2014. Which seems kind of odd, but that is true. That's the last time it happened. They played in Arlington for a stretch there. This is going to be a fun game to follow with. I think Texas Tech is getting some wins down the stretch. And I believe because of the way that this offense kind of works and Joey McGuire's energy, I think Texas Tech finishes above Baylor in the Big 12 standings, and they obviously have to win this game, I think, to make that come true. So I'm taking Texas Tech this weekend. But that also feels like one of those prime games where Baylor shows up and they kind of make you think what went wrong in the second half against Kansas and the week before against West Virginia. But I'm going to ride with the Red Raiders this weekend, which, by the way, if Tech wins this game, they even up the all-time series with Baylor 40-40-1.
Yeah, I think this game's really interesting as well. It's a game that I wouldn't consider touching if I actually had money to gamble on it. But it's one of those situations where I look at this game and it's really tough to go into Lubbock and win, especially when you're on the road. I don't really particularly think this Baylor team is overly good. Blake Shapen's kind of had an up and down year, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. We obviously don't love their rushing attack, which is led by Reese. He doesn't even have 700 rushing yards on the season at this point, but he does have 9 tutties, which is nice. And Baylor's defense has kind of been up and down a little bit this season as well. So this game's tough. I'm actually siding with Tech because it's at home. I think if this game was in Waco, I would probably lean towards Baylor. But it's also tough for me to bet against Dave Aranda because I really just kind of think he's a great coach, and I think he gets a lot of respect. So I'm going to side with Tech, but I think it's going to be a good one. I think it's going to be a really good game and entertaining to watch too.
Yes, should be very, very entertaining. So that will do it for us. I guess the best way to phrase it is you don't really know what's going to happen until kickoff at 2:30 against Oklahoma State. But you can follow along with us over at EMA Online on Rivals, and we will get you covered with all your pregame coverage and then in-game, post-game, whatever else follows along there. And either the feeling come 6 o'clock Saturday night in Manhattan is going to be, okay, we're back, this thing is going well, or K-State fans are going to feel like crap and feel very unlucky that Adrian Martinez was banged up. I think those are the only 2 possible outcomes, and we will see which one it ultimately ends up being. But that'll do it for us. We'll let you get into your weekend and get ready for the Cats and the Cowboys